Oh, hey! 4 cousins, many states, many armaments, and a very, very important assassination. Do you understand what it is? Yes, exactly. Today, I'll tell you how the First World War broke out. Stay close to us throughout this magnificent story. Let's get started right away. What causes started this heated and famous conflict? There were 4 main reasons. 1. Nationalism. In the early 20th century, many of the European countries such as Germany, France, United Kingdom, and many others wanted to take a stronger and superior position compared to other countries. Let's take an example. Serbia wanted to unite the Slavs into one large state, or the French and the English were trying to colonize many countries in the world. 2. Secret alliances. Many European countries were deciding to form military alliances such as France, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and the Allies, who however had other adversaries who were entering into military alliances not known to everyone such as Austria, Hungary, and Germany. 3. Also, in the 20th century, a lot was being invested in the military field, so they were all very dangerous and armed. In fact, in those years, it was said that Europe was an arsenal ready to explode. But the triggering cause and well known to all was the assassination, which took place in Sarajevo at the hands of the famous Black Hand of the Habsburg Archduke Franz Ferdinand, future heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which occurred on the 28th of June 1914. Not exactly a beautiful Sunday for the Archduke. But who was the Black Hand, and why was the Archduke killed? The Black Hand was a secret association with a political and delinquent aim. They had a predominantly anarchist ideology and wanted to regain the expropriation of the lands and their transfer into collective society. To achieve this, they thought of carrying out an action that would show their presence and decided to organize the attack on Archduke Franz Ferdinand, expecting to get something. Well, they got the First World War, and they're killing. I'd say not a good move. In particular, our dear Archduke was killed by Gavrilo Princip, a crazy maniac who was a friend of our dear Jeff. Or maybe it was better that I didn't say it. Run away, Jeff, hide! Let's continue our story. After the assassination of the Archduke on the 28th of June 1914 until the 11th of November 1918, there was the greatest war seen in history. The First World War, or also called the Great War, had the following 2 major factions. The first was on the part of the Central Empires, which involved the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires. On the other hand, the conflict with France, the United Kingdom, the Russian Empire until 1917, and the entry of the Japanese Empire and the United of Italy starting in 1915. And Jeff watching from afar with a coconut on the beach. Maybe this wasn't really like that. It was a very hot, heated, and bloody war in which more than 70 million men were mobilized throughout the entire globe, and of these 70, there were 60 million in Europe, of which 9 million of them died. Due to the war, clearly the economy and the organization of civilization became chaos, and there were many civilian victims not only from the war, but also from famines and epidemics. We'll stop for a moment from this not very serene adventure, and I invite you to like and subscribe, and thank you for getting to this point. In this period of wars, how is the economy and society going? To give you an idea, imagine the value of the entire railway lines of Asia, Europe, Africa, and Australia together, which have a value of 150 billion. Well, knowing that the debt was public in 1914 before the war, it was 150 billion, and in just 18 months it reached 300 billion. In fact, many of the countries that were at war were reconsidering the choice made because it was not only destroying their cities, but the entire economy. Materials were rising in price, food was increasingly limited, and services were increasingly lacking. Well, things weren't that bad for all the countries involved. However, for example, since the war had caused a lot of damage to Europe, Europe still had to look to the future and turn to foreign states for the regrowth that sooner or later there would be. One of the protagonists was the United States itself, which in 1919 gave $9 billion to the United Kingdom to rebuild itself from the wounds of the war, and to think that with only this maneuver had Washington become the strongest global financial center of those years, of which until recently in 1914, London was on the throne with $3.5 billion in investments. Japan also had enormous benefits because it obtained important trade routes in the Pacific area, and therefore takes control of a good share of the market. I think Jeff would have loved to stay in Washington sipping some good hot tea dressed as a gentleman. Isn't that so, Jeff? Concerning people like civilians, soldiers, and many others, that period was a mark on the soul that permanently shocked people's minds and bodies. They were all sadder, poorer, and much more afraid of what people might do next. But after all this catastrophe, how did the war end? Mainly with two events. 1. The entry of the United States into the war in 1917, bringing with it equipment and fresh soldiers ready to fight with better training than those in Europe at the time. 2. With the very famous Treaty of Versailles, which consisted of a large meeting of all those involved in war and making peace, and this meeting took place in Paris on the 28th of June 1919, signed by 44 states, but within it, the treaty also contained some restrictions of military type, reparation of war debts, and many debts to pay. One of the major states punished was Germany, with a military limit that could not exceed 100,000 units. They could not have an air force, and they could not have warships, and also a huge fine imposed in 1921 of, well, £6,600,000,000, and also to surrender all the colonies of the time. I'd say it didn't really go well for Germany. Here we are at the end of this interesting historical episode. What did you like most? What would you have done in that situation? I greet you and see you at the next episode. And in the meantime, I invite you to watch these videos.